Okay, this is going to be a long video, but I just thought I would share the best I could because um, for those of you who may know me from college days, I used to be a lot thinner than I am now, but it all started when I went on a holiday for a summer break at my mom's house and basically got more and more ill after I drank some bad water and ended up going down for a fishing day out in Clitheroe, where I was asking for directions at a pub and got stopped by an officer. And that in itself rung an alarm bell because they said, well, it seems that somebody at the pub reported me. And that was the downward spiral where I was feeling sorry for myself. But the thing with the police is, even if you are innocent, if they think you are a scrote, they will treat you like they were a scrote. And I had been cold turkey on medication and started losing weight very quickly. And even though I had my own theories about what was going on, it wasn't until much later we saw that I ended up going back to a friend's house in Cleveland's where I used to live, and it was about in a course of a day, it went from feeling sorry for me to saying that there was naught wrong with me. So I ended up going back home, being swapped between here, there, and everywhere until people had enough of me. And after being through all of this ordeal with a parent who was suffering with addiction, who couldn't help me and I couldn't help her, I ended up going to my auntie's house because at the time my dad was having treatment for terminal leukemia, and I was staying at my auntie's house where about halfway through the next day a phone call was made that led from having a welfare check from the crisis team turned me into me being sectioned under the Mental Health Act and having the police have a warrant to take me because I refused to go voluntarily. Now, that in itself, because I've been through so much, but I'm not convinced that in itself, that phone call was an accident, because this person who did it to me has had it done from another of other people, where when you're in a place like that, the state of the ward was disgusting, and not only that, you're ending up with people who are also unwell themselves in different ways and have their own reasons for being there, who give you a hard time for just doing whatever. And when it came to me being discharged and I had a tribunal, they just raised it to a Section 3. So because of my father, who wasn't himself a monster, granted it's my father I'm talking about, I think he failed me on many, many fronts in ways that they were describing it as psychosis, even though I didn't find out what it was, but I got sick from drinking very bad water. And so to this day, I will spend my living years wondering actually what that was. Now, if anybody else has any similar experiences in this, please drop a line and let me know. But people feel like they've been betrayed by the system, and I'm not joking, I absolutely do. So it came to a point where we had a conversation, and the people in the room said, well, why is Brian still even in here? And they said, we don't know. So you would feel like, being in that situation when you're not getting the help and the answers you deserve or not being heard, and end up being underweight where you're already thin to the beginning. In the beginning, you look like a heroin addict because you're very poorly, mentally and physically, and it happens, I say, very quickly. And you have less rights than a criminal. So you tell me, when you're sectioned in a hospital, how does that have any difference from being locked up? You have less rights than a prisoner. And not to mention the 8 stone of weight I gained in a year from a poor medication that wasn't reviewed, but I was taking my meds because I figured I had to in order to get out of there as quickly as possible. So I still suffer from the same consequences of obesity and weight jabs, and none of that did any good. So, and remembering, being sectioned is not a decision that a mental health team takes lightly, but when they've exhausted every other option, but I'm pretty certain there were failings on certain fronts, multiple fronts, like the hospital and the people involved that kind of were the, how do you say, the catalyst to this situation, which was life changing. But I'm not sure if that's a common thing, but in order for me to be sectioned, there was a court order by a judge with the information presented. I don't think that's always the way it's done, but in my case it was. I'm not sure why. So, you feel like kind of betrayed by your best friend who wouldn't admit, or too selfish maybe to admit, that I was unwell because they were niggled all the intention wasn't on them. And I mean, that might be hard to believe, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. That in itself was not the only time I feel like I didn't get the answers I deserved. When it all started on a holiday in Bulgaria with having bad water that led to me having some sort of parasite and chronic food poisoning with horrible, horrible stomach cramps, and a dad whose priority was not to get me to back to the UK, but had his own priorities that were basically not more important. Now, for a parent, I think that's disgusting. But knowing my dad, that's classic Chris for you. So if anyone else has any similar experiences, please let me know and I'll be glad to answer your questions back. Because I also take meds, and once you're on that meds, when you take it as long as I do for a 20-year period, and it's not cheap medication, however, you feel like you get into this mess because they have an old saying that once you're on antidepressants, you never get off them. So I just take them, and the one good thing I'll say is that they do help with sleep. That is one thing I will say.